Tomato garden tour time. This is Monday, June 20th, and today we will take a look at all the tomatoes in the garden, followed by a couple more videos of peppers and everything else. I'm Gail, the gardening gal, and let's get started. Okay, here are my twins here in the alcove, and first let's take a better look at this one. This is called Fireworks, and it's been interesting because it never did anything until maybe the last week, and all of a sudden it has just exploded with flowers in the heat yet, because we've had a horrible heat wave. So we'll see what happens with Fireworks. Next to Fireworks, we have the first of my black cherries, and as you can see, black cherry is already starting to produce some fruit, so this is doing great. This one is already probably about 5.5 feet tall, so not too terribly bad. Here is Prairie Fire. It has probably done the worst, well, maybe the worst of all the tomatoes. I'm not impressed with the way the plant has grown, but I gotta say that it has a lot of tomatoes on it. And let me get a little bit closer. So these are pretty good sized tomatoes. We'll see what's happening. They are developing their little stripes, so we'll see what happens with Prairie Fire. I'm hoping to get some of the ripe tomatoes off of it before it keels over. Let's check out the dwarf tomatoes. This one here is Tennessee Britches, and it's been very shy about producing any fruit so far. However, I do have some flowers on it, so I'm very hopeful. Now, next to Tennessee Britches, we have a new Big Dwarf, which has been doing beautifully. Now, there are tomatoes on there, but I tell you, they're so dense into this particular tomato that I can't see any yet, but we can see more flowers forming. Next we have Rosella Crimson, and this one is doing pretty well. Let's see if we can get the tomatoes in shot. So here we have a couple of tomatoes on Rosella Crimson. Now next to Rosella Crimson we have Sweet Scarlet Dwarf, and there are probably tomatoes on there somewhere. I just haven't found them yet. Now this one is Dwarf Arctic Rose, and it really does have a lot of tomatoes on it. Now all these are Determinate tomatoes for my dwarfs, but only this one has been really prolific so far. Not the best looking plant of them, but maybe it's because it has so many tomatoes on it. Well, next to it is, let me see if I can remember, Purple Rain. So Purple Rain has tomatoes on it, and I tell you, this one I had to restake this weekend because it just fell over. It's such a big plant for a dwarf this early in the season, and it flopped. So what I did is I put 3 stakes in it. I've got one here, one in the back, and then one in the side, and that is keeping it upright. No ties, just the stakes. Here is my big beef tomato. This is my, I think it's my only hybrid tomato that I'm growing this year, and it hadn't been doing really well in the last video, but it's starting to do much better now, and I do see flowers on it, but it did not handle the heat very well. It really started having some serious dieback towards the bottom, or towards the bottom of the plant. Well, just as well, on account of the fact that I wanted to go ahead and take out those leaves anyway, but this is Big Beef. So this is my Red Robin, the first of them, and I have tomatoes that are starting to turn red, so I'm real thankful about Red Robin doing so nicely. This is the first of the Red Robin, so let's go check the other one. Here's my other Red Robin, and as you can see, it looks like it has a magnesium deficiency. I did just fertilize it with CalMag last night, so hopefully that will soon take care of it. But otherwise, this one is doing beautifully, aside from the purple leaves, that is. Now here's one of my orange hats. It just is full of tomatoes. Now they haven't started turning colors yet, but it's doing wonderfully well. I have at least one more orange hat in here, so let me find it. So here's the other orange hat. It's not quite as prolific so far, but now here's the second of my black cherry plants. And as you can tell, this one is actually a little farther along, or maybe you can tell, as far as fruit development goes. So I think it's because this one gets absolutely full sun, and the other one really gets partial sun. So that one is 4.5 feet tall, or 5.5 feet tall maybe. And this one is probably 3.5 feet tall maybe. So this is my second black cherry. This is one of my Boxcar Willies. It fell over this weekend, so I kind of had to do a temporary stake until I can get the cage on it. But this has been doing pretty well so far. It doesn't quite look like it at the moment because it had fallen over and the branches are growing every which way, but it's still doing pretty well. Here's my Cherokee purple, and it has started fruiting, so let's see if we can get a better picture of the fruit. Let's see, hold on a second. Well, this one is kind of hard to see, but there is the first of the larger fruits on Cherokee purple. And this is one of the 2 plants that I actually bought instead of started seeds with. Now this one's Golden Queen, and it wasn't doing too well in the last video, but it started perking up now, and it does have a couple of tomatoes on it. Now this is my other Boxcar Willie. It has been doing beautifully. It is showing the least stress of all the tomato plants. Now I've had a horribly hot set of days, so very unseasonable, in the upper 90s for several days with warm nights. This has done beautifully. Again, showing about the least signs of stress of any of the tomato plants, and it has plenty of tomatoes on it. Right next to Boxcar Willie is Drushba, and this one is not performing as well as I would have liked. The heat really set it back, so it does not like heat, at least in my climate, but it does have plenty of nice tomatoes on it so far. Excuse the barking dogs in the distance, but this is the second of the 2 tomatoes that I actually bought. So this one is Mortgage Lifter. Yeah, I had a Halliday's mortgage lifter that didn't make it, but I decided to go ahead and buy a Mortgage Lifter plant. So here's hoping. It's actually grown a fair amount since I bought it, even though it looks kind of spindly at the moment. This is another one that hasn't fared too well with the heat, and this is Crnkovic Yugoslavian. Now I do have a bunch of tomatoes on it, but they formed before the heat wave hit. But I did want to show this. It is my first just about ripe tomato of the year. Unfortunately, a bird or a bug got to it, so I won't be able to eat it, but there we go, the first ripe tomato off of Crnkovic Yugoslavian. Now, this is watermelon beefsteak. I had high hopes for it this year, but it does not like the heat. What can I say? The high sustained heat this early in the year is very unusual, but I do have some tomatoes on it, so hopefully I will get some things on it. There's a really big one in back that I can't get to, but it's also showing some big signs of stress. Speaking of signs of stress, this one does too. This is Pink Fang. Now I've got to say that Pink Fang has had a lot of fruit. Let's see if I can get down and see some of these fruit. Now this is all over the plant. These have very large paste type tomatoes, and it has set them quite frequently, and I have fruits almost up to the top of it so far. So despite what it looks like, it seems to be fruiting quite well. Now here's Stus. This is the first of my Adapt tomatoes that I've had. It looked really, really, really bad in the last video, like total leaf curl. And it still has a lot of leaf curl, but it has bounced back quite a bit and it has quite a few tomatoes on it. So what I showed you were the two that were on the bottom that are the largest. So we'll see what Stus ends up like. Another of my Adapt tomatoes. And this one is called Glazier's Giant. And I have several sets of fruit on here. This one has just 2, but I have some that have clusters of 3 or more. And this one has already hit 4 feet tall because the top of this, where it has all the zip ties, this is 4 feet above soil level. So it's already hit 4 feet tall. And it's doing pretty well. So far I'm happy with Glazier's Giants. This is the third of my Adapt tomatoes, and this one is Blue River. Now this one is already past 4 feet tall, and I'll have to overlay some pictures of some of the tomatoes that are on it, but it has set a ton of large tomatoes, so I'm really excited to see what they're like once they're ripe and I can eat them. Now this one has probably shown the least stress of all the Adapt plants, and it's the tallest, and I'm really hopeful about Blue River. Here's Tennessee Britches. Now so far the tomatoes have been nothing to write home about as far as size goes, and I picked this one because of size, but it is setting a fair amount of fruit. And again, this is the one that's nearest to the bird feeder and bird bath. So could be all these deposits of fertilizer. Don't agree with it. Now this is one of the ones that was looking really bad the last video, and this one is Kustralee. Well, all of a sudden it decided to behave like a normal tomato plant. It started throwing out nice leaves instead of the funky ones that I had last time. And I do have some tomatoes on it. It has not quite gotten to 4 feet yet, but let me see if I can find pictures of the tomatoes. So here are a couple of the newer tomatoes, and let's see if we can get a better picture of some of the existing tomatoes. There's one on this side, and there's another one on the other side that is about 2 or 3 times as big. Here's the other one of the large tomatoes. This one is black from Tula. Now this one has probably been the worst of all the tomatoes this year. It just looked horrible. I mean, if you think it looks bad now, you should have seen it before I topped it. I do have some tomatoes that are getting ripe, so I figure I had nothing to lose by letting it top, or by topping it and then letting it set fruit or finish setting its fruit, ripening the fruit, but I'm not real hopeful. Last on my list is what was called black strawberry, which I highly doubt is black strawberry. The reason why is black strawberry is supposed to be a large cherry. If you've seen the Campari tomatoes in the grocery store, that is what the tomatoes are supposed to look like. It's just black with stripes. But let me show you the tomatoes. Yeah, this isn't exactly what I would call a cherry tomato. And you notice that they're all kind of heart-shaped. And that explains the wispy foliage that I was talking about in the last video. If it is an ox heart type, it is extremely prolific because I've got some, I've got the big ones down there. I've got more up here, more here, and I've got more developing all over the plant. It is the tallest plant by far. So if this plant has good tasting fruits, I'm going to save like a zillion seeds off of the first ones, since they were the first one to bloom and they're probably not crossed. So we'll see what ends up happening with the black strawberry wannabe. Well, that's all the tomatoes for today, and let's go ahead and do another video, separate video, for the peppers. This is Gail, the Gardening Gal, signing out, saying have yourself a great day.